I always paint flowers from my imagination. I don't know why, but I find it very intimidating to kind of look at a flower and then portray it in my paintings. Maybe I lack the skills to do it. So I think this year I have put up a challenge for myself where I've decided that I'm going to pick up some flowers and then practice them, so that I can know from reality how to translate that into a painting. And today I've chosen Ranunculus flower. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the flower name correctly. Is it Ranunculus? I think so. Well, so this is what I have painted. So I sat down last week. I went through a lot of Pinterest images to understand the composition of the flower, how the petals are placed, and I found it really hard to translate it. One, because I don't usually do that, and two, maybe because I usually paint on a smaller canvas. So this is a 5x7 inch size, and I think to bring in that much details into a flower when your canvas is really small is a bit difficult. But I think if you look at it, I don't know if you might be able to tell whether it's a ranunculus flower or not. Anyways, let's get into the video then. The supplies that I'm using today are all linked in the description box below, so be sure to check out the links and the details to all of these. I'm using a watercolor palette. I think this is a 48 color palette from the brand Artistica. They're really nice paints and they're not chalky, so I like them. And I'm using a filbert brush size 4. This brush is really nice for finer detailed paintings. So since I'm using a 5x7 inch paper, a size 4 brush is really perfect. I can use the flat side of the brush to create like an oval petal shape, and also I can use the thin side of the brush by, putting it in an angle and drawing really thin strokes, as you can see here right now. And since this brush is a bit synthetic fibered and the bristles are stiffer than the other brushes, I can get really thin strokes, and because of the synthetic nature, I'm not adding too much water, you can see. I also need to have really thin petals, so I'm just taking just enough of paint and not too much of water in the brushes. What I'm trying to do is to create an illusion of really closely spaced petals. So for that, what I do is I'm using the thin side of the filbert brush and adding small strokes. So that would show us the edges of the petals. This is really an experimentation for me. As I told you earlier, I am new to actually painting real flowers, and on the hindsight, I just feel like I should have chosen a simpler flower than this. It is becoming a little more tougher than I imagined I could paint. So just tag along with me and see how it turns out. I'm happy so far with how it is looking. The petals looks really closely spaced and it looks okay for a top view. I'm a little bit worried about the monotony of the flowers. I mean, I just feel like it needs a little more depth, but I do not know how to add in more depth given that I've used a really thin brush and really thin strokes. It seems like impossible to add more details to what's already there. So I'm moving on to the next flower, and for this one I intend to have a sort of a side view. So I'll have the similar structure at the center, but I'll have a little bit of open petals at the outside. So for that, I'm going in with the same shape. The bottom petals are going to be slightly opened, whereas all the top petals are closely spaced like how we did earlier. So it's just small and short C strokes with the side of the brush. While I'm doing this, my first flower is already kind of dry, and I thought I'll go in and add slightly orangish shades here and there just to have that added detail. I can't go back and add details to every single petal because they're just way too thin, and it's just wasteful to go in and add details to something which is already small. That in itself is a detail, isn't it? So this is a close-up view of how I'm painting, and I'm intentionally leaving a lot of white spaces in between. The white gaps are what would be the tips of the petals. So when you imagine a flower, you look at a flower from the top, the white shades or the shades which are lighter are actually the petal surfaces which are at the top, and the darker ones are the petals which are deeper inside. But when we are painting, we don't paint with white paint, isn't it? So the second option to this would be to just paint as normal and then use a white paint to mark the highlights. But when we are painting, we are actually reversing that technique by leaving white spaces intentionally and coloring the depth or the shadows. So always keep in mind of this factor. I've had 3 flowers and I just feel like I need 2 buds. So I don't have any definition for buds. They are closed petals. So I'm just adding like a bulbous bally shape with a little bit of wiggles. Probably I might add in, convert them into 2-3 petals or not. I don't know at this point. And I've mixed in a little bit of green with the yellow so that I can add in for the stems and leaves. At this point, I have to honestly say that I'm not very confident when it comes to drawing stems. And looking at what I'm drawing right now, I just feel that I have spoiled this painting. Not that the flowers were pretty already. I didn't like the flowers either. I mean, it doesn't look that great, but they are okay. But the stems that I'm adding right now, they look really stiff. What I have felt is that in watercolors, you have to have that loose attitude. Everything has to flow. That's the aspect of watercolor. So you add colors and the water helps things flow. And even in the structure of how you paint things, it has to have that flowy effect. Whenever I paint flowers which do not have stems or which are not in bouquet format, I feel that I've got that flow really well. The leaves look really nice. The flowers, the arrangements, the composition, they all look all cohesive. But in this instance, I just feel like I've taken the flowers and, popped it up on some kind of stick or something. I have to honestly say I hate how the stems look in this instance. Even the leaves, they look really artificial. I don't really like it. They don't have that flow. This is something I need to really concentrate on, focus on, and understand how to be more loose and how to be more flexible with the way I paint stems and leaves. And if you follow me on Instagram, I'll leave my handle in the links below if you want to follow me there. What I wanted to say was that on Instagram, I have admitted several times that, my focus this year is to challenge myself to paint something through which I can learn something. So I have been trying to paint all of these with the intention of getting better with the stem. But I think I'm not getting better because I'm not evaluating what I'm doing. I'm just trying to paint and see. And this time what I'm doing is to just fill up some background shades to make it look better. Clearly it hasn't worked, but I think overall the composition looks fine. But the takeaway being that there is something to learn every time. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and we'll meet with another one.